The OSG Sports app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. All you got to do, install the OSG Sports app and listen to our podcast from college football, soccer, lacrosse. What are you waiting for? Let's get this done. Get the OSG Sports app today.
What makes college football special? It's the rivalries and trophy games. From the Book of Knowledge to the Golden Boot, it's college football's rivalries and trophy games. Here's your host, the online sports guys.
Tommy Palmer thanks. John Wilkerson here. This week, the Iron Skillet will be contested in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex as SMU and TCU will meet for the 99th time. Later, it's the Rio Grande rivalry between New Mexico and New Mexico State. Phil Canner discusses that great rivalry with the voice of the New Mexico Lobos, Robert Portroy, and the voice of the New Mexico State Aggies, Jon Nixon. And Jon Nelson goes small college as St. Olaf and Carleton play for the GOAT Trophy in Division III. Jon discusses that unusual trophy with Roy Koenig, the voice of the St. Olaf Oles. We begin with the SMU-TCU game. The Mustangs and the Horned Frogs first met on the football field in 1915. Other than 2 years SMU didn't field a team in the late 1980s, and skipping each other in 2006, SMU and TCU have met continuously since 1926. Since 1946, the Ponies and the Horned Frogs have played for the Iron Skillet. Now, legend has it an SMU fan was frying frog legs on a skillet. An offended TCU fan suggested let the winner of the game decide who will take the skillet and the frog legs. And the skillet remains a prized possession for the winner. And to talk about Saturday's SMU-TCU matchup, the Iron Skillet game, is Brian Estridge. He's the voice of the TCU Horned Frogs on the TCU Sports Network from Learfield, IMG. My first question to you, Brian, have you ever put your hands on the Iron Skillet?
John, I have, yeah. In fact, I wanted to make eggs in it one time, but I got shut down. It is literally an iron skillet, and it would be a nice campfire iron skillet. You know, it would be me and you and a bunch of our buddies. It'd be great to be outside of the campfire. We could whip up some things. That is because it's practically lived in Fort Worth for the 20 years that I've been here. You know, you look at the success the Frogs have had against SMU. I think it's 7 straight, 11 of the last 12 years. It's been residing on the Fort Worth side of the Metroplex. So we've gotten accustomed to seeing it in Fort Worth.
Now, this game has a very colorful beginning when the Iron Skillet was first proposed. There's a legend that frog legs were being cooked by a SMU fan, and a TCU fan was offended, and they decided that they had exchanged the skillet from after the game. Well, whoever won the game, they would get the skillet, and that's kind of how it started. Is that true, or is that just legend?
You know, that is what I've always heard. Let's go with it. You know, it went away for a while, and they kind of brought it back in the 80s. 80s and 90s is when it really started to come back again. There were several decades where the Iron Skillet wasn't passed back and forth. In fact, there are some classes that folks say, you know, we didn't know anything about the Iron Skillet. But it does have a legendary history. And I think everybody in the last 2 decades knows all about the Iron Skillet and the fact that that's what's played for here in Fort Worth and Dallas.
Myself, growing up in Arkansas, I'm a child of the Southwest Conference, so I remember this game pretty intimately. And it's very unique. It's Dallas versus Fort Worth. Now it's Big 12 versus American, Power 5, Group of 5. A lot of intrigue here. Where is it in the landscape, I guess, in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex as far as interest?
You know, that's a good point, John. And over the years, it may have a little bit of a luster because the two teams are no longer in the same league. You know, there was a stretch there when they were kind of housed together in Conference USA. But the Frogs have kind of always been one step ahead of SMU as far as the conference reshuffle is concerned. And so you lost that edge that you had with the Southwest Conference. And then, candidly, you know, with the way that the Frogs have kind of dominated the series the last 2 decades, I think it has meant more for SMU than it has necessarily for TCU fans. I don't think there's any fear of the rivalry going away. I mean, I think it's good for both teams. The crowd in Fort Worth will be big on Saturday. It's always a large crowd in Dallas when the Frogs play over there. So I think it's got its real advantages. I don't think it's going to go away. I think the fact that the two coaches know each other so well and like each other now, I think that's important for this rivalry. The fact that, Sonny Dykes coached under Gary Patterson. So, I think there's some value to it. I'm not going to tell you that it has the passion of an Alabama-Auburn, just because they're not in the same league, and it doesn't fall always at the end of the year. So, but I think there's some value to it, and I think you'll continue to see.
So what's it like on the TCU campus this week on SMU week?
It's interesting. I wouldn't necessarily say it's totally different than any other game week. I mean, yeah, there's some fun that takes place between fraternities, some organizations that do some things to work together. The biggest thing that's come up, it was about 10 or 12 years ago, the SMU band, during their halftime performance, unbeknownst to TCU officials at all, as they were on the field and they formed their SMU on the middle of the field, the band members dropped rye grass seed on the field. Again, no one knew that this was happening until the spring, when the rye grass decided to rear its ugly head and spell out SMU on the field. It was a pretty amazing ploy by the marching band. Yeah, it was a great ploy. No one knew it was happening until all of a sudden you wake up 4 months later and there's an SMU in the middle of the field. It was a great ploy by them. And so you've had some fun things like that have happened over the years. And who knows what happens on Saturday. Here's the one thing that has happened, John. It's been a great games. No matter the record, these two teams always play, it seems, close, physical football games. Even when SMU's been down, this game seems to bring out the best in them. TCU, several years ago, went to 2005, I think it was, won at Oklahoma when Oklahoma was in the top 5. Frogs were on a roll. Came back the following week and lost to an SMU team that was really bad. And that was the only loss in the year for that team. So, it has had that kind of feel to it for a long, long time. Favorite
memory that you have of this rivalry?
I loved playing the game in the Cotton Bowl. When I first got here a couple of decades ago, your SEC friends will know the name Mike Cavin, who was a quarterback in Georgia. And he was the head coach at SMU, and SMU was pretty good at the time. Dennis Franchione, you'll remember, the former head coach at Alabama, had just taken over as the head coach at TCU, and it was a great game in the old Cotton Bowl with a big crowd, and that to me is one of the ones that stands out the most. Is the fact that that was where it kind of needed to be. Even though it was outside of the Southwest Conference, it was no longer a conference game. You were playing it in a historic venue that has been, sort of a trademark of that league forever in the Cotton Bowl. And you had these two storied programs going at it. Both of them were quality at the time. That, to me, is one of the ones that stood out. That was a game that LaDainian Tomlinson had a big day, too, for TCU, the running back.
We're talking to Brian Estridge from the TCU Sports Network from Learfield IMG. He's the voice of the TCU Horned Frogs. And, Brian, what can we expect Saturday? What's it going to take for TCU to be successful?
Well, I think, John, there's a couple of things. Like I mentioned earlier, Sonny Dykes knows so much about this TCU program now that he's a head coach at SMU. He's got a bunch of TCU guys on his staff. They know the signals. They know the scheme. I think that makes a challenge for TCU even greater. I think the fact that it looks like they're good. They're 3-0 for the first time, since the mid-'80s or something like that. I can't remember what the date was. It's been a long time. They've been 3-0. And, I think they've got Shane Buechele comfortable at quarterback, the transfer from Texas. They got a really good freshman running back who had an impressive night the other night against Texas State. They're being much more physical on defense. So I think it's a real challenge for TCU. They're going to come in very confident and knowing that this is they can make a name for their whole season with a win here. And so all that wrapped up, I think TCU's got to play a really good game. Played well defensively against Purdue, obviously, last Saturday night in West Lafayette. The offense, ran the ball physically and controlled the time of possession. But I think they got to see a little bit more out of the throwing game to free up those running backs. If not, SMU's going to sell out and put 8 guys in the box. I think we're in for a great game on Saturday at 2:30, and I think the emotions will be high on both sides.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is going to be a fun one to watch. For me, it's appointment television. So for 3:30 Eastern time for me, I'm going to be in front watching FS1's coverage and listening to you, Brian, as well. But listen, Brian, I appreciate you joining our show and kind of educating our listeners on the Iron Skillet game between TCU and SMU. Have a good one Saturday.
Thanks for calling, John.
And now we bring in Rich Phillips, the voice of the SMU Mustangs on the SMU Radio Network. And I guess, Rich, the first question I have for you as well is, have you laid hands on the Iron Skillet?
I do believe I did one time. This is my 19th season doing SMU games, John. They've only won it twice, so there haven't been very many opportunities. But it seems like I do remember in 2005, after the first time that they won it, since I've been there, that I had a chance to check it out in person.
So you got down there, put the hands on it, and it's actually a skillet.
It is I think, like the giant 14-inch iron skillet, very heavy, very realistic, got a little plaque on it for what it's for. But yes, I have had that opportunity. I don't think I kissed the trophy, but I did hold it.
Well, there's a lot of legend in this and how the Iron Skillet got started. Of course, the one thing I stuck out in my mind was an SMU fan was frying frog legs in a skillet, and a TCU fan was offended, I guess, by that, and said that whoever wins the game that day gets the frog legs and the skillet, and I guess the idea was born then. Is that true, or is that a story of legend?
I'm not really sure about how it began for so many years ago. It was, shortly after World War II, I guess they began using it, but it kind of disappeared at some point. And finally, back in '93, a member of the SMU student body painted the face of a TCU student body president red and blue following an SMU win in Fort Worth. And then they decided to revive the skillet. And so they came up with the engraved skillet again in 1993. So there was a dead period there where it didn't happen, but, everybody's got to have a rivalry game with a trophy on hand these days, and the more unique, the better. And so I do like having the Iron Skillet as being part of this rivalry.
As a child of the Southwest Conference, like I am, this was a conference rivalry and a good one. And then as times have changed, TCU has moved on to the Big 12 after many other conferences along the road, and SMU is in the American. And there's a lot of uniqueness in this rivalry, Rich. I mean, it's Dallas versus Fort Worth. It's got some uniqueness to it.
Yeah, and it's two private schools, too, that are, frankly, academically are competing for a lot of the same students for sure. Two very like institutions. They're both small, being private schools. And as you said, it's been played for so many years. I mean, this dates back to nearly the beginning of football for SMU back in 1915, as far back as they have played. They've continued it on, even not being in the same league. They've only had one time, I believe, since the death penalty days that the two schools didn't play. That was back in 2006. So they've kept it going. It's, as you mentioned, crosstown rivals, about 33 miles apart between the two schools. And so it's really cool that we get to have this every year and get to alternate stadiums that it's played in, too.
What's it like on campus during TCU week?
Certainly there's a lot more interest on the student side. They like to get in to this rivalry kind of game. And frankly, when you look at who's been on the schedule this year, this is the one that the students are definitely the most interested in. The team being 3-0, I think, has also kind of raised the awareness a little bit of the fans and the students a bit more, too, because it's the first time SMU's been 3-0 in 35 years. So they're finally getting off to a good start, generating some excitement. TCU made the top 25 in the AP poll this week, and so that's another little carrot that's out there, too, if SMU could knock off a ranked team on Saturday.
Very exciting stuff. What are some reasons why SMU's gotten off to such a great start?
First off, it starts with the quarterback. They've got the grad transfer, Shane Buechele, who transferred from Texas over the summer, and he's been, frankly, as good as advertised. I mean, probably his worst game, and he'll tell you this too, was this past Saturday in a win over Texas State because he threw a couple of interceptions, but he also had 219 yards, 2 touchdowns. He only had 4 incomplete passes. They've run the ball surprisingly well. I say surprisingly because a lot of people expect that with Sonny Dykes and the air raid offense, all they do is throw. but Xavier Jones is among the nation's leader in rushing touchdowns with 7 through the first 3 games. He had 3 in each of the first 2 games. And then they had a true freshman, T.J. McDaniel, that broke out this past Saturday from South Lake Carroll. He had not played in the first 2 games, and Sonny decided over the week that he was doing enough on their scout team. They wanted to put him in the game, and all McDaniel did was run the ball 8 times for 159 yards and 3 touchdowns in his debut. So obviously running the ball has been better than I think anybody would have expected. And then on the defensive side, they have played far better than they had the last couple of years. They're still not going to threaten any national rankings, but a couple of years ago, this was among the worst defenses in the country, and now they're able to take control of some games. They only gave up 241 yards last week to Texas State. The week before, Mason Fine at North Texas was limited to 152 yards passing by the SMU defense. That's a guy that's being pumped up for the Heisman. So they've really improved on the defensive side of the ball. And then, like I said, the quarterback, Buechele, has really helped settle things down offensively.
So what needs to happen for SMU to be successful against the Horned Frogs on Saturday? Obviously, they're going to carry some momentum with the 3-0 start.
No doubt about that. The first thing they're going to have to do is not turn the ball over. Last week was really the first time they'd had much problems. They had the 2 interceptions, as I mentioned, that Buechele threw. They also had a fumble in the game. It's the first game they've been on the negative side of the turnover margin. That's something that they've done really well under Sonny Dykes, is win the turnover battle. And then they can't have penalties. That's the other thing that they have done really well. Last season, the total number of penalties for this team in the first year under Sonny Dykes was the lowest in 20 years for an SMU team. Well, they had 7 against Texas State on Saturday night, including 3 personal fouls, and that really has stuck in the coach's mind that they need to not make mistakes like that. And then the other area where they've been making mistakes is their kicking game. They have been just this side of dreadful. They have 4 missed extra points in 3 games. They have 2 short field goals that have been missed. It's not really all on the kickers. It is their operation. They have had bad snaps. They have had bad holds. They've had bad blocking up front that led to a blocked field goal and a missed extra point. So those are the areas that they have had mistakes last week, especially in the penalty and the turnover area, and then their kicking game. It's a little frightening right now, the struggles they've had kicking the ball, that it could be something that could cost them, especially in a game that, if you're going to win it Saturday against TCU, is probably going to be a pretty tight one. But those are the areas they've got to clean up getting ready for this Saturday against TCU.
So, Rich, where can we hear the game?
1310, 96.7 FM, The Ticket, is our flagship station in Dallas-Fort Worth. And then, like everybody else, we are online, too. You can listen on the TuneIn app, and also SMU Athletics has their own app that you can download and listen to. Myself and Scott Garner calling the game from Amon Carter Stadium Saturday afternoon, 2:30 kick.
I've been to that stadium, not since they remodeled Amon Carter, but I remember it had the highest press box in the history of college football.
You've not been to that stadium, then, if you haven't been since the remodel. It's not so high, but I will tell you right now, the media kind of got the short end of this one because we're in the corner of the end zone now. Because you can thank the Cowboys for that, because they started doing it at AT&T Stadium, and now the only media at all that's at midfield is network TV. So I get to call from corner of the end zone. It's an interesting perspective to try and figure out what line of scrimmage they're on when they're past the 50.
Well, it's a whole new world order now in college athletics, right?
Hey, I'm just thankful they still don't let me in for free. They haven't started charging me admission yet, but that's coming somewhere. It's coming.
Rich Phillips from the SMU Radio Network. Appreciate you being a returning guest on our show, and we look forward to our next conversation.
All right. Thanks a lot, John.
If you're looking for tickets for the Iron Skillet game or any other rivalry games this weekend, there's one place on the internet to search, and that's SeatGiant.com. Now, when you check out, type in these letters, SDH. It helps you, and it helps us. Now let's move out west to the New Mexico State rivalry. And with that, here's Phil Cantor.
Hey, thanks, guys, for the toss. We are going to be talking Rio Grande rivalry here, New Mexico versus New Mexico State. Very, very old and very, very tradition-heavy series. And with us this afternoon is Robert Portroy, the voice of the Lobos. Robert, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time here.
It's great to be with you.
tell us a little bit about the rivalry here. I mean, this is a rivalry that started in 1894 and has been played 109 times. It's an old rivalry, isn't it?
Yeah, the 110th meeting between the schools.
Wow.
It's pretty amazing. Yeah, this rivalry dates back 125 years, and you know what? The Lobos have dominated it historically. The New Mexico team picked up a really big road win in the rivalry last year, and after they'd lost 2 in a row. But Coach Davies had a ton of success against New Mexico State since he arrived in Albuquerque. He's won 5 of the 7 meetings between the 2 schools since Coach Davies arrived in 2012.
Wow, that's really interesting there. Tell us a little bit about the rivalry itself. How, from the New Mexico perspective, how big is this game each year when it pops up on the schedule? I mean, it's really, in this case, it's kind of popping up 4 weeks.
It's the biggest game on the schedule every year. I mean, there are really 2 things that New Mexico plays for each season. One of them is a Mountain West championship. And the other is beating New Mexico State. You know, those are the 2 things. And that's not to say that there aren't other big rivals on the schedule. There are. New Mexico has a long-standing series and rivalry with other teams, particularly in the Mountain West. But this is the one. This is the game. And my first season as the voice of the Lobos, New Mexico hung 66 points on New Mexico State.
Wow.
And, the fact that UNM only won 4 games that year didn't matter as much because they pounded their rivals in Albuquerque. So, yeah, I mean, look, let me put it this way. Whether, they're playing in Ann Arbor or in the Horseshoe, it doesn't matter. Ohio State, Michigan is the biggest thing happening. And we're very much like that. It's Alabama, Auburn. It's exactly like that here for our state in the land of enchantment. New Mexico State, whether it's in football, or men's basketball, those are the 2 things that everybody points at every single year.
What have you been able to see what it's like on campus this week? Is there a little bit more of a buzz and excitement in the air as the game gets closer?
Always. No, there's no question about it. And Coach Davies' press conference is always different, in my experience, when it's New Mexico State week. He has said something repeatedly over the course of the year that it's all well and good that his team was able to go and play in the shadow of touchdown, Jesus and the Golden Dome last week at Notre Dame. That was cool, an unbelievable experience. It brought $1.1 million to the university. But this is a more important game. This is a bigger game, flat out, New Mexico State and UNM. This game, and he said it again, his press conference, is especially true this year. The Lobos are coming off an FCS opponent in week 1, albeit a very good one, Sam Houston State, in a win. And then the number 7 ranked Fighting Irish last week, and a tough loss, obviously. The Lobos are going to find out a lot about who they are this week, and the same is true for New Mexico State. I mean, this is sort of a real window into what these 2 teams are going to look like for the remainder of the year.
And speaking of Coach Davey, how's his health doing? I know there was an issue after the Sam Houston State game. It doesn't look like he's going to be returning to the sideline this week.
Right. He met with the media for the first time since that incident that you mentioned, which he called a pretty serious one. And he has said that it was after he had addressed his team following the victory and gone through the fight song with them, he was making his way toward his post-game media responsibilities, and his words went down. It was very serious. He thanked the UNM medical staff, the entire training staff, the doctors who were on site, the first responders, UNM hospital. He said they saved his life. So he said that he feels very lucky to have had the kind of quality of care that one of the top hospitals in the country, has here at UNM, and he is going to be back next week. He said that. Well, he joked about it today. He said Dr. Joanne Davey is going to give him the sign-off, the final sign-off. That's his wife. There's some things this week apparently that both he and she want to clear, some hurdles, a couple more clearance things in terms of medical standpoint from what the doctors are telling him and them. And he and Joanne are going, to monitor that this week. But he said if everything goes well, he's going to be back on the sideline when the Lobos travel to play Liberty the following week. So he's doing great, and all systems are go, and it's just such great news.
That is very good news. Glad to hear that he's on the road to recovery there. What will the day like the day of the game? What's it like there as the two fan bases kind of gather at the stadium and get ready to go for this game?
This rivalry is 18 years older than the state of New Mexico. I mean, these schools played before the state, got its statehood. I mean, it's let me put it this way: it's the longest tailgating day of the year. There's no doubt about that. And it probably starts for a lot of people hours before the game. This particular game, whether it's played in Las Cruces or it's played in Albuquerque, whoever is interested in this contest all over the state get to it in just a few hours, right? So it's a must-do road trip. Whether you're in Albuquerque and you're traveling to Las Cruces to see the game down there at Aggie Memorial, or whether vice versa, you're in Cruces and you're coming up to see it at Dream Style Stadium. It's a rolling party, literally, on Interstate 25, and then obviously the game day environment, it's really special, and it's cherry and silver on one side and it's crimson and black on the other, and it's just fun to see.
That is awesome to hear. Robert Portroy, the voice of the New Mexico Lobos, we thank you so much for joining us and getting us a little bit of an education here on the Rio Grande rivalry. We're talking Rio Grande rivalry here with the voice of the New Mexico State Aggies, Jon Nixon. Jon, thank you for joining us. The Rio Grande rivalry is a pretty old series, isn't it? It dates back to 1894.
Yeah, these teams started playing each other before the New Mexico was a state. This is the 110th meeting overall. So, I don't know that it has a lot of national focus, but it's a big thing in this state because these are the two Division I schools the state has. And University of New Mexico is in a large city. They're in Albuquerque. That's probably the metro area, about 700,000 people. Las Cruces is where New Mexico State University is. Albuquerque's in the north, Las Cruces is in the south. New Mexico State's town, Las Cruces, is a little bit more than 100,000 people. So there's that dynamic, I guess, if you will. And New Mexico is a state that has really spread out, and there aren't as many towns or as many people that live in it. So the rivalry, I mean, this is not like in the states where football is like a religion, like in Alabama. We were just down in Alabama a couple of weeks ago, and the South football is really something that people get in their blood statewide, and it's a little harder here in New Mexico because the state is spread out, and not everyone has gone to college out here, frankly. So there's not as many alumni that live in the state. So, but for the people that live in the two towns, it's the big deal that everyone points to every year.
Leading up to the game, the week leading up to the game, how much excitement is there? Is there a lot of talk in the Las Cruces area about this? Is it the game that everybody kind of circles on their schedule and says, this is our big game for the season?
Yeah, it is. More so at home. Some people will travel up to Albuquerque, but, not the atmosphere for the Aggies up there will be okay. But when the game is in town, that is the one game that people point to. Neither University of New Mexico or New Mexico State have a real history of success over the last couple of decades. So, when you have a game like this, that you can really think, okay, here's our chance to win a game and also beat our rival. That is the focus. I think people are interested in seeing how the Aggies do. It's more, I think the talk down here is more questioning if they can kind of snap to it. It's been kind of a slow start for the Aggie football team this year, but whenever they play the Lobos, that gets everyone's attention.
And I know the 0-3 start's got to be a little bit concerning, but has the team shown a little bit of signs of life here? Have you been out to practice this week? And if you have, has the tempo picked up a little bit knowing that this game's ahead?
Well, yesterday they were off. I'm going to head out to practice here in a moment, but last week they had some problems, and this was just part of it. The practice field, we had rain and lightning, and so they couldn't let them, which is unusual out here. The one time we don't want rain we get rain. We don't get rain for 4 months. Then we get rain the week that we have our first home game. Anyway, they couldn't practice one day because of lightning. I mean, they couldn't practice outside. They did other things. And the next day, for whatever reason, the field was flooded, so they could only work on 20 yards. So they didn't have good weeks to practice. And they kind of, it was hard. They just, Coach Martin, these are Coach Martin's words, he said they gave the game away against San Diego State. So I think Aggie fans are looking for their team to kind of finally arrive. The first 2 weeks they played at Washington State and at Alabama, and way overmatched there. But, UNM is a team that they're kind of in the same depth of the pool, so I think people will see, hopefully they're looking forward to seeing the Aggies come out and put together their first good game of the year.
I spoke with Robert Portroy as well, and I'll ask you the same question I asked him. What's a Saturday game day like when this game is getting ready to be kicked off for the fans?
For the fans?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. When the game's in town, people, if it's a night, see, this is a day game today. It's up in Albuquerque on Saturday. It's up in Albuquerque. It's a day game. But down here, it's just always a night game, and people will come and start tailgating. Probably at 2 o'clock is when they can officially start. A lot of times, people will come on Friday, park their RVs in the appropriate area, and kind of set up, and wait. And then when 2 o'clock comes, is when they can start people can start tailgating. Aggies try to have a lot of things going on for home games. Food trucks and things, events for jumping areas for the kids, things like that, make it a family experience, and that starts filling in, as we get closer. Usually, it's kind of, the Aggies fans are kind of slow to buy their tickets, so usually there's a line of people waiting just to buy tickets to get in. I can see that from the press box, but and eventually everyone gets into the stadium, and then people get into it. We had a good student turnout last week for San Diego State. They got there early and stayed with the team, for the most of the game, even though we had a little rain in it. People get afraid of the rain down here. They don't know what it is. They're mystified by it. Anyway, but and then of course as the game goes on, of course people get into it, or they hopefully the Aggies are winning, and it makes it more of a fun atmosphere. But the series is pretty good. In the last 10 years, it's 5-5. The Aggies have won 3 of the last 5 times in Albuquerque, and they won last time in Albuquerque too, 30-28. So, Aggies haven't had much success. They haven't had a lot of success overall, but in the last decade, they've had as much success in Albuquerque as they have at home.
Jon Nixon, I appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us here on the Rivalry and Trophy Game Show. You've given us a little insight onto the Rio Grande rivalry. A game worth checking out if you're looking into rivalry games and trophy games, which is what this show is all about. And again, Jon, thank you for joining us. Guys, I'm going to toss it back to you.
Thank you, Phil. We turned our attention to Division III. It's the GOAT Trophy game between Carleton and St. Olaf. Jon Nelson has Roy Koenig, the voice of the St. Olaf Oles, next to talk all things GOAT Trophy. You're listening to college football's rivalries and trophy games here on the OSG Podcasting Network.
Hey, what's going on, y'all? This is Rock at the What's Up Falcons podcast, and I'm joined with my boys. My boys in the house. Where you at?
Yeah. What up?
Oh, gee, and we have Q, and we have Hoop in the house.
Q's here, the most beloved guy in all of sports entertainment.
Indeed. Hey, y'all, we want to thank everyone for listening to us, and if you want to listen to some great Falcons information, check us out on the What's Up Falcons podcast. Right, fellas?
Right. Sure.
Hey, we here every week, baby.
We keeping it real, so check us out. I'm there on Twitter. Holla. Peace.
Subscribe to the What's Up Falcons podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud. Listen to the What's Up Falcons podcast at whatsupfalcons.com.
Welcome back to the Trophy Games Rivalry Show here in the OSG Sports Radio Network and barnburner.ca. Time to catch up with friend of the show. Hey, you come on, Roy, and it's multiple visits. Then, of course, you are friend of the show, friend of the network. That's how this goes.
Well, it's great to get together again with a good friend. You bet.
So, all right, and when we were looking at rivalries and matchups this week with St. Olaf catching up with Carleton this go-around. I've seen goats. I've seen cereal bowls. Is it choice D, all of the above? What are we getting into here?
Well, I think that the goat definitely has a little bit more history to it. The cereal bowl is a factor. Don't forget the eagle in the park downtown. The winning team gets to parade to the park and spin the eagle around, kind of a war memorial park in downtown Northfield. And these schools are a mile apart from each other. This is a unique rivalry to have two, college programs like this a mile apart.
So, do you remember what your first go-round in this rivalry, what your first exposure was?
Ooh. That's a good question because my history doesn't go back too many years with this. I would just say that every St. Olaf coach and player that I've talked to over 5, 6, 7 years, following with the previous announcer and then getting my feet wet in this. I mean, that's it. The game against Carleton is the game that matters, even if you have a rough season. And the Oles have had a couple of those lately. They've picked up some wins against Carleton, so that's been a good thing for them. So the excitement when they are able to hold that goat trophy in the air and run around with and celebrate with it. And then I actually watched the Eagle spin last year on just a miserably humid day, sweat dripping from every person everywhere you could imagine. So I kind of followed the team. They won at Carleton at Laird Field, Laird Stadium, the Oles did. And then they marched the short distance to the park, and many of the players and coaches took turns spinning the eagle, and it was a big old party. So that was the first time I actually sat and watched the eagle spin as part of this. I've watched the on-field celebration for a few years. So it's the proximity of things. There's some controversial things that have happened through the years. For instance, who gets credit with creating the GOAT? Whose fault was it that they didn't get a game in the Metrodome during the Halloween blizzard of 1991? One of the few times the rivalry did not go head-to-head. So there's some cool things that date back a number of years. And with the added bonus, and probably part of the reason why it's such a cool rivalry, is that the schools are walking distance from one another.
Now, when you spin the eagle, do you just spin it toward the direction of your school, or is it just the fact that you're getting to spin the eagle in general?
No, you hit it right on the head. The eagle ends up pointing toward the school that was victorious, but a number of people, coaches and players, would kind of climb the statue in order to spin it. So yes, you do have the eagle pointing toward the winning school, but a number of people get to give it the 360 twirl. In this case, it's been the 360 twirl because the Oldies have won a few in a row right now, so it keeps pointing toward their campus.
All right, so what has it been so far this season for St. Olaf getting into this game? What's the scouting report?
For the Oles so far, they're 2-0, pretty similar to last season. They beat Crown College. They beat Luther College. Luther is a real nice rivalry for the Oles that's fairly, it doesn't have some of those oddities or kind of those signature sorts of aspects to it, but two similar schools and schools that kind of recruit the same players. So the rivalry with Luther is a good one, and the Oles have won that now 2 years in a row. Fell behind last week, but really got rolling. Caleb Willis, it's a name that hopefully some of your folks and followers heard. He had a 257-yard rushing game last week, 33-20 win for the Oles over Luther. For St. Olaf, they've got a new quarterback, but they've got a great crop of wide receivers. Willis back in the backfield, along with a couple of other young running backs that have shown some flair early. The Oles bring back several layers on defense as far as having some back in the line and the linebackers and the secondary. So that's kind of the Oles scouting report. As far as Carleton goes, they're also 2-0, and I'm not sure the last time these two teams would have faced off both being unbeaten on the season. In some recent years, the meeting didn't come so early, and by the halfway point or later of the season, after some of these teams have seen the upper echelon of the MIAC, it's hard to be unscathed. But here early in the season, with just a couple of non-conference games in, both teams are 2-0. So there's another twist of, and I've tried to figure out last time they were both unbeaten going head to head, and that part of my research is still incomplete.
No worries about that. But, when you have these two schools a mile apart, the conversation, is it a 365-day conversation once bragging rights have been established? I mean, is this something that is consistent finger wagging and sternum poking and checking out your buddies in the restaurant and sit there and says, yeah, we got you on this one? How big a conversation piece is this 365 days a year?
I would say probably to one degree, maybe so, because they do have traveling trophies in a number of other sports, including men's basketball, where it's also a GOAT, different trophy, but the same name. So there's a number of different sports where they've got the traveling trophy between the two schools. So I would certainly think it's always on the close to the front burner, even if it's not there. But I think as well, with the nature of sports, win or lose, you got to move on to your next opponent. And in the MIAC, where these teams play, it is Minnesota Conference, of course. It is so competitive that you can't hang your hat on that too long, because you've just got another super tough opponent to get ready for. So it's kind of a mix. I know that's not really a great answer, a little bit of both, but I think it probably is.
When you have seen what's been going on, have you gotten the opportunity to hold on to a trophy, hang on? Is this like a Stanley Cup thing where if you're active in the participation of it, you touch it and you get to hang on to it for a little bit, or at least parade it around, and if you have nothing to do with it and you respect the trophy, you don't touch it, kind of a thing? Have you touched these the bowls and trophies and gotten to spin the eagle and all this?
I have observed and have not touched. I guess that's a good question. I'm not sure what the protocol would be for that. I've been very close to the GOAT trophy, and as far as the Eagle trophy, that involved a climbing up of a ladder, or not a ladder, but they kind of help each other up the side of a statue, and I fear I would fall and break something, so that might not be a good idea to be going after the Eagle. I know when you and I talked about the Troll a while back, which is the Oles trophy, a traveling trophy with Concordia of Moorhead.
Right.
I'm not sure if I want to touch that ugly beast, even though the Oles want to have it in their possession. But I have not touched any of the trophies yet. Maybe this year I'll have a bowl of corn puffs out of the cereal bowl. We'll see.
Is it? Is the cereal bowl and the GOAT, are they under glass? Are they touched by humanity, or is it once it's done? Is it in the sports office? Where do these things go once the game is decided? Is it for public viewing and display and gawking and ogling, or is it under glass and kept under heavy security detail so it doesn't get damaged?
It's probably under a little bit of security. You wouldn't want someone carting off with it just to be funny, and things like that, like schools can sometimes do to each other, especially when they're so close to one another. But I imagine the people who know where to go can take a look at it. Yeah.
When you're one of our guys when it comes to describing activity in D3 football, and it's been fun for us on the show to kind of peel the curtain back a little bit and let everybody who might be in a D1 environment or an FCS environment to sit there and see what these rivalries and trophy games are like when it comes to D2 and D3 football. What does college football mean to Minnesota away from the Division I level?
Well, it's a lot of families, the families, and there's a good number of students at these as well. It's interesting that in many cases, players on the team are sons or even grandsons of people who came before them that played for the same team, sort of family. And then you bring together these different families from different parts of the country that now all have some common. Both of these schools have a roster with players all around the United States and some folks from other countries as well. So it's you get to be a big part of a family. Of course, the crowds aren't as big as at a D1 sort of institution, but that also makes it easier to get to the grill to get a good hamburger before the game or whatever.
There you go.
Yeah, I always think about food. That's of me.
Right there with you, brother.
And then. Yeah, and then there's some cool history. The stadium that they play at Carleton is a old school, enormous stadium and grandstand. So there's that part of it, and people get excited. You got your school song when the team scores. So it's kind of a family, but certainly the students are there to enjoy it all as well, especially when we get a nice weather day.
So since you opened the door, I'm going to walk through it. The best food that you can pick up at a St. Olaf's home game, either in the concession stand or through tailgating, that is unique to Minnesota or the upper Midwest is what?
Boy, I don't know about the unique to Minnesota, unfortunately. Well, I've had a brat at the concession stand at St. Olaf, and that's great. Kleinfield at Manitou is the name of the field there at St. Olaf College. Brat at the concession stand is great, but I'm one for something off of the grill, and they grill hamburgers and hot dogs, and hamburger, cheeseburger, put everything on it that you can. I don't know if there's anything Minnesotan about it per se. I guess and they don't even have a hot dish on the table when you go through. They do have some beans and some chips and a cookie. So it might not have a huge Minnesota spin to it per se, but it smells good and tastes good.
Exactly, and that's what matters. Okay, so now it's time for the blatant plug for those that want to listen/check out the stream, listen to St. Olaf on a regular basis, follow you on social media. Time for the blatant promo. Hit me with all of it.
Oh, my gosh. All right. Well, first of all, this game this weekend, they've had some wild games, high-scoring games that come down to the final couple of minutes. So I would hope for another exciting one this weekend. You can go to the St. Olaf website to catch the home games on video, and then we also stream the audio that way. That's through the St. Olaf website, athletics website. As far as a radio station out of Faribault, Minnesota, it's KDHL AM 920, the mighty 920, as they go by, KDHL. Also KDHLradio.com. I'm on Twitter at Voice of OHS. That's kind of a different story there, but at Voice of OHS, if anyone would want to take a look at me on Twitter. And, of course, the Oles have all sorts of Twitter accounts for various parts of their athletics, including football.
Well, Roy, as always, it's great to catch up with you and get the D3 story up there in Minnesota. And thanks for letting us find out about goats and cereal and twisting of eagles and all of the above. Have a good time. Have a good call. We'll be watching, and we'll catch up with you soon, my friend.
Boy, I appreciate that, John. Great to talk to you.
When we come back, trophies and rivalries continue. You're listening on the OSG Sports Radio Network, and barnburner.ca will be back in 2 and 2.
The OSG app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. Install the OSG app and listen to our podcast from college football, soccer, and lacrosse. What are you waiting for? Download the OSG app today.
Time to look back at the results of our trophy games last week. Iowa won the Cyhawk Trophy for the 5th year in a row, defeating Iowa State 18-17. It was a leg of Hawkeye kicker Keith Duncan with 4 field goals that won it for Iowa. Penn State defeated Pitt 17-10 in State College. Noah Cain's 13-yard touchdown run was the difference.
He'll give the ball to Cain, to the 10, to the 5. Noah Cain, touchdown! Penn State! The Nittany Lions cap an 88-yard drive and take the lead with 5:50 to go in the third. 5 seconds left. 2 left, 2 right. Pickett takes it. Back to pass. 4-man rush. Steps up. Looks. Throws it in the end zone. And it is batted around and hits the turf. Incomplete. And the Nittany Lions win the 100th meeting with Pitt, taking it 17-10. Penn State wins the last 3 in this series. They win 10 of the last 12, and Pitt has not won in this stadium since 1981.
That was Steve Jones from the Penn State Sports Network with the call. Cincinnati rings the victory bell as the Bearcats defeated Miami of Ohio 35-13. It was Cincinnati's 14th win in a row over Miami O. The battle of the bell between Marshall and Ohio goes to the Thundering Herd 33-31. Isaiah Green's 43-yard touchdown pass to Xavier Gaines in the middle of the fourth quarter was the game winner.
2 receivers make it 3 receivers left and 1 guy right. Low snap, Ohio on the blitz. Green fields the football, rolls left, throws deep downfield for Gaines. He makes the catch left sideline 15 and cuts right. Xavier Gaines across the 10, angles over the 5. He's fighting for the goal line. He dives into the end zone. Touchdown Herd, and Marshall takes the lead. 43 yards, and Marshall's on top 33-31 with 7:45 to go in the fourth quarter.
Now Isaiah kept it alive, rolled to his left, found Gaines, and Gaines just kept those eyes on it, Steve, and boy, pulled it in, and off to the races he went.
They're hunting for the bell, and there it is.
They found it They're bell hunting right now, and they've got it.
Marshall comes out with a bell. Isaiah Green knew where it had been stowed. He holds it high. 5 seconds left. Marshall gets the win over Ohio. 2-1. Final score, Marshall 33, the Bobcats 31. The Herds ringing the bell.
That's Steve Cotton of the Thundering Herd Sports Network from Learfield IMG with the call. Over to Division III, and the Old Paint Bucket goes to the Hamlin Pipers in a 31-27 win over McAllister. Tyler Dobbs' 21-yard touchdown pass to Connor Levins was the difference in the game. In the oldest rivalry west of the Mississippi, Coe College defeated Cornell College for the 20th year in a row, 38-0. It was supposed to be the first night game for Coe, but bad weather moved into Cedar Rapids, Iowa, so the game was played on Sunday afternoon. And WPI claims the Transit Trophy for the first time in 3 years, defeating RPI in a field goal battle 6-3. Jon Nelson and I wrap it up when we come back. The OSG Sports app is up and running on your Android or iPhone. Install the OSG Sports app and listen to our podcast from college football, soccer, and lacrosse. What are you waiting for? Get the OSG Sports app today. Jon Nelson now joins me, and great interview with Roy Koenig from St. Olaf.
Yeah, and we've had him on the show last year to discuss other rivalries and things like that. And when we get the chance to reach out and catch back up with old friends and find out that there's more to the story, I think that's another part of the show that's really fun, is that when you sit there and you think that you've gotten all of the trophy games and rivalries out of the way, there's another one that pops up. And so it's we just get to add to the story when it comes to the MIAC.
All right, let's look at the other rivalry and trophy games that are going on in college football this week. In FBS, in the MAC, Bowling Green and Kent State play for the Anniversary Award. It's been given out since 1985. This rivalry goes back to 1920, and it's a rivalry that's really been owned by Bowling Green.
The anniversary, we're talking anniversaries with rivalries now?
All right. Well, here's the reason why, because both schools were founded in 1910, and in 1985 it was the 75th anniversary of the founding of each school, so they decided to create a traveling trophy, and it was called the Anniversary Award. And by the way, Bowling Green has dominated this rivalry. Let's go to Division II. It's a relatively young rivalry, and they play for a trophy, but it's a good one between St. Cloud State and Minnesota-Duluth in Division II. It's known as the Dog Fight, and they play for the Battle of the Bone. It's a bone trophy. It began 2 years ago, and of course Minnesota-Duluth, who's 13th ranked, I believe, in Division II right now, has owned that rivalry so far.
Yeah, and I'm going to go with them again this week. When you have Huskies and Bulldogs, it makes too much sense that you're chasing after a bone. So check and double check, and I'll go with UMD. Yeah,
I'm going to go with them as well. Division III, the Admirals Cup between Massachusetts Maritime and Maine Maritime. That's a pretty good rivalry. You talked about the GOAT Trophy earlier. The Little Brown Bucket between Dickinson and Gettysburg. This is a rivalry that dates back to 1892. They've been playing for the Little Brown Bucket since 1939, and basically it's a mahogany bucket trimmed in sterling silver.
And I sincerely hope that thing is well taken care of, considering the rivalry itself. I'm going to go with the home side here in this one, and buck absolutely zero trends with me when it comes to predicting most of these games. I just a lot of these rivalries, short of ranked teams and things like that, I like to go with the home side just because of that added intangible that we used to talk about when we were talking about Jimmy the Greek.
And finally, SUNY Maritime and Merchant Maritime, or Merchant Marine, will get together this Saturday, and it is known as the Seafaring Scuffle. And that got its start 10 years ago in 2009 as a friendly rivalry between schools whose alumni often wind up working side by side around the world. So this is very much a maritime type of rivalry, and the home team is Merchant Marine. So you're going to go with your trend and stay with the home team?
I think so. And, when you look at the schedule, I mean, just to give you an idea, when it comes to Merchant Marine, you've got SUNY Maritime, you've got Maine Maritime next weekend. MIT is on the schedule. And that one, for me, MIT, I just love it when we get to sit there and break all this stuff down. MIT and Norwich is a part of the schedule too. But yes, I'm going to continue, especially when you have Vitelli, Abbott, and DeBrail selected with as captains, and they're picked third in the NUMAC preseason coaches poll. So I'm going to go with the KP Mariners here.
So we've talked Rio Grande rivalry. We've talked Iron Skillet. We've had the GOAT Trophy. It's been a pretty productive week for us here on the on OSG Sports on the Rivalries and Trophy Game show.
Cereals and goats all in the same rivalry, and like I said, that's the fun part of this whole thing. When you think that there's one attached, all of a sudden you turn around and there's two. And so when you've got cereal bowls and goat trophies, and getting to spin an eagle, you get to spin an eagle in the direction of your school. I mean, that's the fun part of this whole thing, and finding out all that stuff from Roy was a hoot and a half, and looking forward to continuing to tell these stories all season long.
So that's going to do it for this week's College Football Rivalries and Trophy Game show. For Phil Canner, for Jon Nelson, I'm John Wilkerson. Enjoy the games this weekend. So long, everyone.
You can find this and past shows by downloading the OSG Sports app on your mobile device. Enjoy all of our shows from the OSG Sports Podcasting Network. The OSG Sports app is up and running. Download it today.